I think other people are mostly going to talk about John's career and achievements, and I'm going to be talking, as I just did, about his life, his character, and his sense of humor, which may be self-serving since I'm a humor writer. His fault. Recently I was telling John about a humor piece I was thinking of writing about a set of phrases that ad writers think make good copy. They use a lot of phrases like weird tip, old trick, secret easy tip. The ones that get to me are invented by a school teacher, discovered by a mom. I see a lot of these on Facebook, and I think there's an element of conspiracy theory. The authority they claim doesn't come from science or medicine. It comes from some hidden layman's underground. And John cackled, and he cited even older ad copy on the same theme, what your dentist doesn't want you to know. And the very next day, I got on Facebook, and it said, clever mom reveals free trick to a wrinkle-free face. Dermatologists hate her. John was what's called a red diaper baby. His parents, my grandparents, Jack and Ida, were communists and labor union organizers. Ida reported overseas for the Federated Press. She brought the case of Sacco and Vanzetti to the attention of Anatole France. She organized unions in Wisconsin. Jack organized fishermen, dry cleaning deliverers, Boston trolley workers, and longshoremen on both coasts. He was an associate of Harry Bridges and at one time West Coast head of the CIO. He was also a business manager for the Daily Worker, a sardine fisherman, and a carpenter. He also disguised his identity to avoid being deported. He claimed that he was born in San Francisco and that his birth certificate had been destroyed in the Arctic earthquake. So he didn't talk much about his boyhood in Ireland, and I think this left John with a lifelong feeling that you shouldn't talk too much about your personal history, which is kind of a drag for the rest of his family. Once Jack McCarthy went to Chicago on party business, and when he came back, he brought a puppy that the family called Sophie, short for Sovieta. John loved and admired his parents, and he made them proud by excelling in Los Angeles area communist youth activities. But he considered it very significant that as a grown man he was drawn, or even as a kid, he was drawn to mathematics. And he sometimes mentioned that there were other children of American Communist Party leaders who were drawn to mathematics and the hard sciences. He lived at home until he went to Caltech, and he began his drift away from the radical left when he went to Princeton. Apparently, he dutifully tried to be in a party cell when he first got there, but there was only one other member, a janitor, so they gave it up. You need 3 people to be in a cell. By the time I first remember John talking about politics, he was what I would call a liberal. By the time I was in high school, he was a Nixon supporter, and before long, he was a conservative. I should mention that his parents did become disillusioned by events in the Soviet Union and left the party. Now, John loved to sing, and he must have known dozens and dozens of Union songs, but he never sang Joe Hill or The Union Maid. He sang a funny song about the very fat man that waters the workers' beer. I'm sure you all know this song. We can sing it later. The very fat man adulterates the workers' beer with strychnine, methylated spirits, and kerosene, and then dilutes it with his watering can. He does this for profit, and because a strong and healthy working class is the thing that most I fear. That amused John, as well as the final verse in which the very fat man appeals to ladies to pity him. For the water rates are frightfully high and meth's is terribly dear, and there ain't the profit there used to be in watering the workers' beer. 1 minute, I'm sorry. When John moved away, far away from communism, he didn't get religion. He wasn't against religion at all. In fact, he and Jerry Pournelle formed a group called Atheists for School Prayer. He sometimes told the joke about 2 priests talking. One asks the other, do you think the church will ever drop this insistency on celibacy for priests? And the other one replies, not in our time, Father, and not in our children's time, but perhaps in our children's children's time. John could be naive. When John and Marvin Minsky were graduate students, they went everywhere together. And when Marvin and Gloria Rudish started going out, John often came along. One day, Gloria took them both to meet her parents and grandmother out on Rockaway Beach. Gloria told me, I was kind of worried about Marvin's shyness and answering all the questions, the boyfriend questions my parents were likely to ask. Without telling a lie, after greetings were exchanged, I said, why don't you talk to John while Marvin and I take a short walk on the beach? John was a little surprised that Gloria's parents were so interested in him, but he gave a good account of himself. When Gloria and Marvin came back, she says, it was obvious that John had made a real hit with my folks. I summoned up my courage and introduced Marvin as my fiancé. Well, they got used to this and they were mad about Marvin, but they invested a lot of time in understanding John, so they always kept an interest in his career. John had no idea what was going on and no idea why he was being asked all these rather personal questions. John was a great father. When my parents had a genuinely amicable divorce, it was the 1960s, a time when divorced fathers saw very little of their children as a rule. When my parents requested joint custody, it was the first time their family lawyer had ever encountered the request. I think they also got joint custody of the joke about the man who's going to Connemara, God willing. John saw no reason why Sarah and I shouldn't become mathematicians. He raised us to think logically and scientifically the way he thought. Once when his health was failing, I took his temperature and carried the thermometer into another room to read it in better light. I showed it to my husband. My father was angry. He said, anytime there's a number, I want to know about it immediately. He also loved words and language. He sometimes used them to communicate in clear but non-standard ways. When he was discouraged about something and wanted to express that, he'd just say, gloom. If I had slides, there'd be a big slide here that says gloom in all caps. Or if he was not happy about something somebody, let's say me, was doing, he'd say, grumble, grumble. Or if some people, let's say me and Sarah, were talking too much about things he didn't want to hear about, he'd say, cease babbling. But if something was funny, he'd say, ha ha. John had great ideas, and not just in the fields where he worked. Prior to the bicentennial, he had an excellent scheme in which the US would have a birthday party and invite everyone in the world. He had worked out quite a lot of the logistics, how many planes it would take to bring everybody and where they would stay. But he tended to delegate his social life to his wives, and unfortunately for the world, John was between marriages at that time. No wife, no party. Had there been such a party, he might have sung the song about Alexandria, which recaps the plot of the opera Thais. It rhymes heavily with devil he, hat of me with that girl's anatomy, stupor scent with booze of more than 2%, and what a joke on me for that there dame to croak on me. He improved it by writing a final verse which rhymes the consequence with untaken up concupiscence. Kitty points out that John was generous, a good present giver. I think she's just jealous that John got season passes to Great America so Timothy could go every week. He was an open-minded man. When one of his favorite science fiction writers, Lois Bujold, praised the romance writer, Georgette Heyer, John started reading Heyer and analyzing her writerly techniques. Relatively few computer science professors are seen publicly reading Regency romances. I'm looking at you. And he had great hair. I don't think he would understand why that got a laugh. John scared some people. He'd raise his eyebrows at them. He'd make them define their terms. He severely frightened several young men who visited our house by asking them how much steel he thought Japan produced in a year. But not only was he a convivial, generous, and funny man, he was a radical optimist, a category he invented. A radical optimist is a person who believes that things will turn out okay, even if people don't take his advice.